Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for joining today. So this is A2X's second webinar as part of the Buy the Book series. So today we're covering a step-by-step guide to Shopify and Xero bookkeeping with A2X. So on the call today we have Wayne Richard, who is the COO at Bean Ninjas. We've also got me, so I'm Amy, Product Marketing Manager at A2X. And then we've also got Manuela Abrams, who's our Support Manager at A2X. So if you've asked any questions or written into A2X before, it's possible that you might have spoken to Manuela and her awesome team. So great lineup on the call today, a lot of accounting and Shopify and e-commerce expertise. So I think there's going to be some awesome takeaways from today's session. Awesome. So I mentioned that Wayne is from Bean Ninjas, which is an e-commerce accounting practice. So I'll let Wayne jump in and tell us about Bean Ninjas.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Amy. So Bean Ninjas is a specialist e-commerce accounting firm. We support scaling e-commerce brands across all platforms and help them truly get unstuck from the complexities that are e-commerce accounting, really with a goal of helping them live out the freedoms that they're exploring through their business.
Awesome. It's really neat. I recently was speaking to someone and they couldn't believe that there were practices that actually specialize in e-commerce, but I think it's such an important one, and we'll cover it today, why it's so necessary to have an accountant that actually lives and breathes and understand all the complexities of e-commerce. So what we're going to cover today, so there's going to be three key things that you're going to take away from this webinar. First of all, it will be why accurate Shopify accounting is key to profitability. That's what everyone's working towards, right? Everyone wants a profitable Shopify business. So we'll cover that first. We'll then cover how to accurately automate your e-commerce accounting. And then we'll also cover some key things to consider when you're automating. So if you're using Shopify, A2X, and Xero, we have some really nice takeaways and a list of things that you can consider. We'll also then have questions and answers at the end. So if you've got questions as we go through, you can pop them in the chat below and we'll jump to those at the end. Great. Okay, I thought I'd start by giving some kind of high level context and explaining sort of why we're here and why we're covering this topic. So we mentioned that usually businesses are wanting to be profitable. So why is it that some businesses are not profitable? So did you know that 32% of e-commerce businesses fail because they run out of cash? And then 29% fail because of cost and pricing imbalance. And then many other businesses fail because they try to scale too quickly. I guess building on from these stats, one of the saddest things is that many of them don't even see it coming because they don't know or they aren't confident in their numbers. So we talk about knowing your numbers and businesses failing because they don't know their numbers, but what are these numbers that we talk about? So I thought I'd ask Wayne to jump in here and actually explain to us what numbers businesses need to know.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. I think before that, it's important to understand, you asked the question and setting the agenda, why accurate Shopify accounting is key. And really, it's simply put, having accurate accounting helps you build confidence in your numbers. And the key to profitability in e-commerce is really the ability to make informed, confident decisions about pricing, inventory management, identifying areas for improvement within your business by sometimes reducing unnecessary expenses and investing deeply in those opportunities that will increase your profitability. So what we help advise is really building confidence across your understanding and some key numbers within your business. We suggest having visibility into the top line sales across the various sales channels that you're selling within. More importantly than that, also the operating expenses that go into supporting your brand's ability to sell across those channels. Of course, we're in the business of e-commerce and selling products, so it's critical that you understand your cost of goods sold. For those that aren't aware, this is simply the cost of getting that product from your supplier to a warehouse so that you're able to then provide it to your customers. Once you look at those top line sales and remove the cost of goods sold, you are able to understand your gross margin. This is simply the fuel, the cash that allows for you then to spend on your marketing efforts, your wages and team cost, and those varying operating expenses in your business. Some other metrics that are more particular to e-commerce, simply because many brands fuel growth on the back of paid ads and customer acquisition strategies, is to get a bit lower in the understanding of margin. And that's taking and understanding your contribution margin after marketing expenses. So the calculation there is simply your gross margin less your customer acquisition cost. As you move down the P&L, you often want to understand what your bottom line is. And the bottom line is simply your sales less all the expenses that have been recognized on your profit and loss. Lastly, you can't build a business on profit alone. It's super critical that you also understand your cash flow. This typically is the first thing. Sometimes the only thing sellers look at is that balance in their bank account, but more so than the balance in the bank account, you would need to understand the impact of those obligations that you've already made against that cash. So tracking cash flow at the end of the day is critical.
There's a lot to it, isn't there? You think of a traditional brick and mortar store, they've probably got all their customers coming to them and all their stock in their store. There's so much to consider when you think of an e-commerce business, and it's getting so competitive too.
Absolutely. And there's often different tailwinds and headwinds that change over time. So it's really getting clear on what these numbers are and having those timely and accurate financial statements available so that you can begin to understand and sometimes get a little bit ahead of those decisions that can help really course correct your business.
100%. And sometimes it's neat because you'll hear of someone that's like brought out a product, they're super passionate about it, and then it's grown really quickly, and then they're kind of like, but I have no idea like what, if I'm making any money, or what my costs are. So I can imagine that's a relatively scary position to be in. Okay, great. So we have covered the numbers that you need to know, but why is it that so many businesses don't know these numbers? And I guess the key thing to keep in mind is that, as we've just kind of discussed, Shopify accounting and Xero is really complicated and time consuming. So what are these complexities? So the number one is payout source. So you're likely getting a batch deposit hitting your bank account from Shopify. So this means Shopify has grouped together a bunch of orders, excuse me, and pay you those in one lump sum. Now you might also have payment gateways on your site like Afterpay or PayPal or Klarna. And this also complicates things because you're also getting these lump sum deposits from these channels. What, I guess, going into the next point, the key thing to keep in mind with these is that this payout isn't just sales, and this is a mistake that often gets made. They are made up of a bunch of different transaction types. So Shopify is bunching together all of these orders, paying you for them, but that's not just sales. It might include some tax collected, which is obviously a really important one to identify. You might have some discounts, you might have some refunds, you might have fees, shipping, all these things that Wayne was mentioning before that actually need to be broken out from that deposit so you can understand how your business is actually doing and how much of that money is actually yours. So this is an example of what a seller would actually see. So showing you a specific example. So you can see here on the left, this is the money that would hit your bank account. So you'd see this in your bank and maybe in your Xero as well. And this is the money you've received from Shopify. So it's really tempting to mark this amount as sales. A lot of businesses make that mistake where they'll say, okay, this is the money I've been paid, this must be my sales. But if you have a look on this side, you can actually see that this business didn't do $15,000 in sales. They actually did 24,678 in sales. So if they just classified that 15,000 to a sales account, then they would have massively understated their income, which is a big one for obviously tax, but also if you're wanting to sell your business in the future, and just a whole bunch of reasons. Obviously, you want to know your sales number is accurate. You can also see that there was some shipping income, there was some sales tax collected, there was gift card liabilities, pending payments and disputes. So a whole bunch of things that need to be correctly accounted for and give you far more visibility into what your business is actually, how your business is actually performing. So with e-commerce accounting or Shopify accounting being so complicated, as we've sort of explained, unfortunately, many businesses do sort of one of three things. So they'll ignore it. So they'll just sort of have the money coming in and not really pay too much attention. Maybe they're focusing on growing their business, and then months down the track, or even years down the track in some cases, it sort of, I guess, flares up and needs some attention. They'll create best guess entries. So what this means is, I sort of mentioned it before, they will classify their deposits as sales, or they'll just kind of enter numbers that might not be entirely accurate and use that as a method for their accounting. Or they might spend hours trying to do it manually. So they might pull a report from Shopify, put it into a spreadsheet and try and figure out what's going on. But it all boils down to, if you are not accurately accounting for your Shopify store, you're going to have limited insight into your profitability and your business performance. So I thought I just might go back to you, Wayne, and see if you've got any sort of anecdotes or examples of when you see this sort of not work out so well.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important is really to share a bit about how to accurately automate your e-commerce accounting. And it really boils down to 4 simple steps. I think once sellers begin to keep all the receipts and invoices organized and easily accessible in a tool like HubDoc, and then begin to implement cloud-based accounting software like Xero and QuickBooks Online, alongside the third-party solutions to handle inventory, and of course, A2X for that sales accounting, it really creates a system that they can then begin to really build that visibility and that confidence, but also like hiring a professional. I think oftentimes we look at those gaps, either it's time, your understanding, or interest to get these processes done. So really leaning upon someone to keep you accountable and actually deliver upon those tasks is important, but also setting time for like cadence of reflection and planning, really digging into what those numbers say, what the story's trying to tell you, so that you can begin to influence. I handle the sales calls for Bean Ninjas, and it's very often we hear sellers share over and over, my books are super messy. I knew that this area of the business was important, but I neglected it simply because, I didn't have the time. We all know what it looks like as a seller wearing multiple hats. Sometimes bookkeeping is not the most glamorous task, and not one that's looked at in growing the business. Or also, as you shared too, they lack the desire. And it's not always a negative thing. It's simply that they saw cash in their bank account. And they thought, wow, the business is doing phenomenal. There's no need really for me to focus on the books. And they have that hunch that things are going okay. Or also that they're just focused on those areas that really they add the most value in. So it's not to be faulted, but really you need to design that system and bring across the team that really can make this happen for you to get that clarity.
Definitely. And I can attest to the point about the e-commerce accountant. It's funny, even when we're preparing for this webinar and going through all of the things that you have to do sort of outside A2X, which we'll get to in a moment, I was like, oh my gosh, there is so much more to it than what I even realized. So I can see why you get a lot of value out of actually working with an e-commerce accountant. Awesome. So the good news is it's not all doom and gloom. There are processes and systems and accountants you can work with to make sure that you are accounting for your Shopify store correctly. So that's the whole reason A2X exists, so you can have accurate e-commerce financials. So how A2X works is it will pull your uncategorized sales, fees, refunds, and taxes from Shopify. So all of those orders that we mentioned before will come through into A2X. We'll then categorize them into an entry to be sent through to your Xero. So essentially what it will do is it'll organize all of the individual sales and fees and anything that was included in your payout and create a really nice summarized entry to be sent through to your Xero. This entry will then appear in your bank feed, so it goes through as an invoice. Then when you're on your bank reconciliation screen, you'll see a really nice little entry from A2X that will match perfectly to the money that you've been paid. And so you'll see one-click reconciliation. And then the whole reason for this and the accurate information is then you'll be able to run accurate financial statements. So you'll be able to see a far more detailed profit and loss. You can see this example here is actually broken down. It's a multi-channel seller. They've got Amazon sales in here, Shopify and eBay. You can see their COGS have been split out. Some of these numbers that Wayne was mentioning before, there's now far more visibility and also confidence that these numbers are correct. So I could cover why A2X or why users should use A2X, but I thought I might actually ask Wayne to do this.
Yeah, I'd love to share a story of a customer that we had been supporting. You did share the profit and loss across multiple sales channels, but we were supporting a fast-growing men's grooming brand that had launched in Australia and was looking to explore whether or not their products would do well in the US market on Shopify. So with the help of A2X, we helped organize their chart of accounts and their profit and loss statement to provide visibility across the sales and the cost of goods sold numbers, not just across geographies, Australia against the US, but also by SKU. They only had 3 SKUs they were looking to launch in the US. The visibility that provided for them was to help understand the profitability of these products in the US market, despite the increased cost of goods sold to ship, store, and fulfill to the US customers. So it really helped them understand what product sets made sense for them to list and sell in the States.
Awesome. So visibility that we keep talking about, that's so key. Awesome. So what I'm now going to do is just give you a demo of A2X. So we've talked a little bit about how it works, but let me just jump into another screen. So what I might actually, how I'd actually start the demo is I'd show you a screen that you might be familiar with. So this is, or hopefully familiar, or if not, maybe you'll get familiar when you sign up for an e-commerce accountant and start automating your books. So this is a Xero banking screen. So what you'll see here is a bunch of transactions of money that's been sent and money coming in. So if we scroll down here, we can see there's a bunch of payments coming in. This is a multi-channel seller, and you can see here there's a couple of payments that have come in from Shopify. And then this one here has a really nice entry and it's ready to be matched. So what the seller would be able to do is just click OK, and that payment would be reconciled. That's the entry that's come through from A2X. If that entry wasn't there, they would then need to try and either create an entry themselves, or this is when the temptation is here to put this to a sales account. But as we've covered earlier in the webinar, this is more than just sales. So jumping over into A2X, this is what the main screen will look like. You can come in and create an account. The first thing that you'll do is connect to Shopify. So that's a few easy steps. You just need to connect your Shopify store and then do the same for Xero. So those are the 2 main steps for getting connected. And then the next step is the accounts and taxes. So essentially what you're doing in A2X is telling the software where you would like your transactions to be posted to when they go through to Xero. So essentially you want to say sales going to a sales account, fees going to a fees account. The good thing is A2X can help you with this. So this account has already been set up, but you can come in and we've got a questionnaire that you can run through, just that will ask you a few questions and it can help you with your mapping. So you can see here in this case, the seller's in the United States. So we'll go United States. It asks if I'm tax registered. So I'll say yes. It asks if there's any other countries that you're registered for paying tax in. So if that's the case, you can select that. I'm just going to go none. You then get the option of whether you'd like a custom setup or an or an assisted setup. So the custom setup is if you've got any, additional complications with your business, if you're selling in multiple countries, or if you'd like to use your own accounts within Xero. Otherwise, you can go with the assisted setup. Now what A2X will do is it will create these accounts for you within your Xero, and you can click Save and Continue. So what this does is, it's kind of the baseline for your mapping. So what we absolutely always recommend is that you have an accountant look at these mappings with you to make sure that they're correct for your business, because it's created by, data from a bunch of Shopify sellers, and what we'd usually recommend is our best practice. But there are so many intricacies that go into e-commerce businesses that need to be considered. So we always recommend, I think actually it was one of the notes on the slide, on the questionnaire, that you actually need to get this checked by an accountant. But what you can see here is that all of the transaction types are broken out and you can see there's a whole bunch of detail. So there's the shipping you can see here, and it's broken down by shipping that has been taxed or not taxed, or if it's gone overseas. And so this is where the information is really broken down. So the entry that we saw earlier in the presentation, where you could see you had visibility into your data, that's what A2X is looking to provide. So then what will happen is every time you're paid, you'll get an entry coming through into A2X. So we can see here that these are all the deposits that will be hitting your bank account. So if we click on this one, for example, we'll be able to see everything that was included in that payout. So you can see the seller would have received $42.50 in their bank account, and this is what that was made up of. So it was some sales that wasn't taxed. You can see the tax has been split out here, Shopify fees, shipping, and shipping tax. So a whole lot more visibility that will be sent through into Xero, and that was the entry that I showed you before. So this one's actually already been sent to Xero. What will happen is it will be sent through and appear in your bank feed here, ready to be reconciled. The other thing that A2X can provide is a cost of goods sold entry. So this is generally, I guess, a simplistic way of accounting for your cost of goods sold. So what you do is you upload your COGS into A2X. So we'll list all of your SKUs, and then you need to go in and upload your actual price for those SKUs. Would definitely recommend again working with an accountant to make sure you've got your COGS accurate, because whatever number you put into A2X will essentially calculate the number of those SKUs that were sold and then post the total value over to your accounting software. But in terms of making sure that you have the right prices in there, that's obviously really key, and that's something we'll cover further in the presentation. But A2X can also send through a COGS entry. That's the total value of your COGS that were sold. So that's A2X in a little bit of a nutshell. I'll jump back into the presentation. Brilliant. Okay, so we've covered why accurate accounting is really important, and we've covered how A2X works. But what we also wanted to do is provide you a bit more visibility or context into some of the other things that you need to be doing if you want accurate financials. So obviously A2X will automate the payout reconciliation part, but there's so much more that goes into an e-commerce business that you need to be aware of. So alongside A2X, here are some of the things that you'll need if you are going to start doing your e-commerce accounting, I guess, end of month reconciliations right now. These are the things that you would need. So you'd need to make sure you've got your monthly bank and credit card statements. So ideally, these might be already going into your Xero account, into your banking feed, but you also need to have those on hand to make sure you're accounting for any other transactions that might have occurred. So as we said, A2X covers the e-commerce, but there's probably a whole bunch of other transactions that you need to be accounting for. You need to have access to the Shopify finance summary. So I'll go into a little bit more detail shortly about how you find that. If you've got any loans, you need to have details of the transactions on those. Any merchant account statements. So if you have other gateways on your website, such as Sizzle or Klarna or PayPal, you need to have the statements from these to be able to track the money that they should be paying you, or any fees that are being accounted for, and any other bills and receipts that are applicable to your business. Awesome. So we're now going to run through 21 things that you need to be considering when you are doing your end of month e-commerce bookkeeping. So the first step is you need to send your sales income entry from A2X into Xero. So that was the process that I ran through earlier, sending through the entry into Xero. You also need to be recording any bills or expenses. So as I've mentioned, A2X will cover the transactions that happen on your Shopify store, but it's highly likely you'll have a whole bunch of other expenses or bills that you need to be accounting for, whether that's warehousing, or if that's freight, or if that's your COGS, anything else that your business is, any other fees or expenses that your business needs to be tracking. You then need to be allocating your bank transactions and start your reconciliation. So what I mentioned earlier, you need to be going through that banking screen and starting to classify what those transactions were. So Manuela, you probably see this sort of stuff or get asked questions about this all the time. Is there anything you sort of wanted to jump in and put special mention to? Oh, I think you might just be on mute, Manuela. Wayne, can you hear me on it?
No.
Oh. Just down the bottom, there should be a little panel and it'll say mute, stop video. No.
Am I working?
Yeah, there. Woo!
Okay,
We
I'm
can
sorry.
hear you. That's okay.
Sorry, got a little bit of
No
a
worries.
glitch there. All right, yeah. So
Always
just further on for that sales and income from Shopify, especially. So if you are familiar with Shopify, you might find it can go from like very easy to really complicated things. So I think a few notes when it comes to dealing with Shopify sales would be to really watch out on third-party integrations and other e-commerce channels that your client or you are integrating with your Shopify store. So it's also important to note that A2X is a software, which means it has its own limitations. And if you are using third-party apps, then it might likely be, we can work with third-party apps, or probably it can affect and impact the way A2X would capture and bring those data in that are related to third-party apps. So what we do in A2X is we gather those information across. We're getting smarter. We're trying to build a workaround if we can we can as much as possible to help our clients and our users, as well as also our accountants and bookkeepers. But we just need to give them a heads up that sales channels, especially when it comes to Shopify, can really cause a lot of issues in terms of how you will account your sales. So if you need help in those, 99% of the time, we would be able to help you transfer those across and make your data accurate. But obviously, there are some edge cases that we could work with you and give you a proper workflow.
Absolutely. There seems to be more payment gateways coming up every day, to be honest. I remember I used to get asked all the time whether we'd ever seen a random payment gateway, and we'll pick it up, but it doesn't mean that it's always going to be straightforward to reconcile it. So
yeah, I think it's more of like when your client, for example, they are selling in Facebook, right? They integrated their Facebook account with their Shopify. So we consider it as a different form of sales channel. It's actually not from your online website. So Facebook, it still comes through as a payout with Shopify, but then because Facebook is a third party, so we consider it as a separate sales source for Shopify. So, yeah.
Got it. Awesome. Okay, jumping through into our next steps that we need to be considering when we're reconciling our e-commerce financials. So the next one that we have there is review and update your product costs. So whether you're using A2X's entry or not, you need to be making sure that you are correctly accounting for your COGS and making sure your product costs are up to date. So I've recently learned that there is a lot that goes into this, and it's really common at the moment for prices to be increasing and there to be delays and things like that. So this needs to be reflected in your cost of goods sold. So what A2X will do is it will be able to calculate your COGS for you, but you need to have that accurate COGS number in there. And so COGS is probably one of the biggest expenses as an e-commerce seller. So definitely work with an expert or an inventory tool, whatever is required for your business to make sure that you're getting these correct. So you can then record your COGS. So you'll send the entry over that I showed you before and send it through to your Xero. You need to review your month-end inventory balance, and you need to adjust for inventory shrinkage and losses. So that's essentially making sure that your inventory numbers are correct. So anything else that either of you wanted to add, I guess, to the inventory product stuff?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, go ahead, Wade. Sorry.
I was just going to echo it. It's extremely complex, and there's no tried and true definition on what to include and what not to include in inventory. So I think it's extremely important that there is a defined definition within your brand that these are the costs we are going to include in our cost of goods sold number. We call them landed cost figures that we're going to upload to A2X, and then begin to understand where those other costs will be incurred, whether or not it's on the balance sheet. But as you shared at the end, taking the time to understand how different is the balance that's showing up in our inventory management solution, or for some sellers, it's a simple Google spreadsheet. and what's being reported in our accounting software so that you can true those entries up. Because oftentimes sellers will wait until year end and a question from their tax accountant will be, what's the value of inventory? Or in worst case scenarios, they'll look to exit their business. And someone doing due diligence would say, wow, it doesn't quite look like the inventory balance being represented in the warehouse matches what's representative in your financial statements and in Xero. So it's really critical to define the definition of what's included and what's not, be consistent with that, but then also reflect and really remeasure what entries need to be done at critical points. I suggest monthly, at a minimum quarterly, to making sure that number is best represented. Manuela?
Yeah. Yeah. So we always get a lot of questions in terms of like whether A2X handles inventory, how does our COGS feature work, etc. Right. And yeah, so we're always ended up with this explanation to our users that they need to understand how A2X works with COGS. And it means that our feature is built on sellers wanting visibility about gross profit margin, right? As Wayne mentioned before, how important your gross profit margin is affects how much you could cover for your costs outside of selling your products. So with A2X, we don't really count actual quantities every time you sell, every time you buy or you purchase your products and sell it online. So we don't really count at the quantity per value, right? So what we do in A2X is we do average costing. So I think we get a lot of like, do you record first in, first out? I purchased my inventory in January. Now I need to replenish it in June, etc. How do you account for the costs? So I guess for the A2X standpoint is that the good rule of thumb is to give each of the business owner, business seller, an idea of what it looks like on an average basis to show their profitability, their gross margin profitability. So I'm not saying that we can track inventory, but at least it gives you from the P&L side, the feature that allows you how profitable your business or you're selling your business. And it can impact whether, cost prices are rising, whether you're buying too much, you're buying it at higher cost, maybe lower cost. So it can give you a lot of management perspective and management decision making that will be really helpful and beneficial. Now, I think the other thing that I would definitely, a lot of these things very common for small business owners, business sellers. They are asking, oh, when I purchase an item, I directly put it against my cost of goods sold. And then when they scale, right, they'd be like, oh, why do I end up with a net loss at the end of the year? So that's one thing to point out, that you can better explain to your client that if they're doing the cost of goods sold where they are matching revenue with the allocation of cost in a specific period, then they need to start keeping track of their inventory as they are purchasing those items. So sometimes it's easier. Trust me, it's easier. It's a lot quicker for accountants or even just businesses to lodge everything as part of their cost. But profitability wise, it's not really a good way to present the numbers and will not really give you much value in terms of knowing and understanding how profitable your business will be. And I think my third point is that also there's some complications when it comes to, say, if you're using a third-party inventory software. So if you have a client who's able to use, outside inventory software. So like Wayne said, there's no perfect inventory system really. So it can help ease out our lives in terms of dealing inventory quantities, making sure, your warehouse quantity matches up what you have in your Xero. But at the end of the day, you may want to use your third-party inventory apps. And most common issue probably would be, how do you integrate those in conjunction with A2X if you're using A2X to process or split out the different fees and sales transactions that you have? And obviously, there's that issue if you do not want to double book your sales transactions and inflate your income. So we do provide, extra steps to like marry those two softwares together. How you can use A2X in conjunction with the inventory software your client is using. We have workaround and workflows as well for that one. So we avoid double counting of your sales transactions that flows through to your books.
Nice. So much useful information. I used to have a lot of conversations with customers, and they'd ask us all the time which inventory management solution they should use. And it certainly seems to be the case that some are good for some things and some are good for others. And to be honest, I just used to have a look on our partners' website. So like on the Bean Ninjas website, like what inventory solutions do they use? I'll just suggest those to the customers. Or even better, go directly to one and talk to them about the inventory solutions, because that's where you're going to get a lot more expertise.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So we've covered inventory. We'll jump into the next section, which is similar. So, and I guess we've possibly covered some of these points here. So if you're not using A2X's entry, you still need to make sure that your COGS is getting posted through to your Xero. So you might be tracking your COGS in Shopify. So you need to just essentially make sure that you pull the COGS report out of Shopify and make sure that it's entered into Xero. You need to review your returned quantities. So A2X won't track the COGS that have been returned. So you need to make sure that those are accounted for. Just because they're classified as returned doesn't necessarily mean that the stock was returned to the warehouse. It might have just been a refund or something along those lines. So you just need to make sure that you're making sure that your quantity numbers are up to date. And the same with sending products to influencers. So are you sending stock to people for free? Are you running promotions that is impacting your quantities of SKUs and things like that? So all of these things need to be factored in and accounted for when you are tracking your COGS. Awesome. So the next one is you need to review your Shopify finance summary. So A2X actually has a Shopify finance summary within it that is in the exact same format as the Shopify finance summary. So you can find this under your analytics tab and then reports. So here you get a breakdown of all of the transactions for the period. So you'll be able to go in here and then compare it to the A2X finance summary. You want to make sure that the sales amount that you have in there is the same as what A2X has got. If you are in your Xero account in that banking screen and you see that there's a deposit that has come in from Shopify that doesn't have a corresponding A2X entry, it's possible that you haven't actually sent it from A2X. So go in and make sure that it's been sent. You can also set them up to automatically send. Or it might be that you need to, if it's a larger payout or if there's some level of complication there, then A2X might need to refetch that entry for you. So if you don't see it in A2X, reach out to us. You need to review your order edits. So these are edits that happen after the payment has been made, and A2X will usually create an entry for you that's adjusting for the order edits, but you do just need to keep track of these and make sure that they're being cleared out. And then the same with manual orders. So this is kind of similar to the one that we had before about the sending stock to like influence or something like that. Sometimes you might create a manual order within your Shopify so that you're accounting for the quantity of stock, but there might never be a payment for that order. So you just need to make sure that you're on top of all of these things that are happening in the Shopify store. You then need to reconcile your payment gateway. So we've talked about this a little bit earlier in the call. So A2X will reconcile your Shopify payments perfectly. And what we will do is create an entry to a clearing account for any other payment gateway on your website. So say you're using PayPal or Afterpay or any of those, they will get a separate entry and it will be posted through to a clearing account, but you need to make sure that you're actually clearing out that the balance in that account. So what that means is going through and making sure you're accounting for any fees. So any PayPal fees or payment gateway fees, those will need to be accounted for. You'll need to review any pending payments, so money that hasn't come through yet or anything along those lines. Chargeback, so that is what will come through from if there's like a dispute or if there's the credit card company might have disputed payments or charged things back. Those also need to be accounted for. And then the other one to think about is currency conversion. So if you are selling in multiple currencies, there might be some FX things that you need to be accounting for there. So Xero does have a multi-currency function, but it's still worth making sure that you are correctly accounting for and tracking all of that. And then lastly, you need to be reviewing the financial statement. So once you've got all of the information in there and once everything's been accounted for and is balancing nicely, you'll be able to run these reports in Xero to be able to run your profit and loss in your balance sheet. And to be honest, this is what it's all about, having the correct information in there. So you have these statements and you can actually go through them. And then this is when an e-commerce accountant is really going to come into their own, because it's all very well having accurate data, but you actually need to be reviewing that data, seeing what that data is meaning, looking at, have your costs increased? Do you need to increase your prices? Things like that, all of those numbers that Wayne was mentioning earlier. So those are our points. I'll open it up to you other two. Was there any other, examples or things that you wanted to add in?
If we have time, I'd love to share another quick story. So,
always.
Yeah, you mentioned reconciling to your payment gateways, and this often becomes problematic as brands scale. There's so many deposits, so many settlements that are posting across all of these various accounts. But we were supporting a seller that sells drinking card games for parties, and they opened up Amazon Pay on Shopify. And while they had already been selling on Amazon, their assumption was that those sales were being included in the fortnightly deposits from Amazon. But in our work with them and reconciling and using A2X to help us understand all of the different payouts, we found missing deposits that weren't being reconciled to any bank transactions. There were no deposits in any of their accounts. So they contacted Shopify and they found that they had not linked a bank account to release those Amazon Pay deposits to. So it was like winning the lottery. They had $50,000 of deposits that they were able to reclaim and have deposited into their bank account.
Far out. It's funny, you often hear the other way, people didn't know of a bill that they had to pay or an expense, but what a nice little bonus to have $50,000 waiting there for them.
Quite, it's not often also that we as accountants get to share good news with sellers, right? So in this case, we were able to really be a part of an amazing win for this brand.
100%. I mean, this is why people need to keep track of their numbers, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's a lovely story, right? And yes, Amy, I think if we have time, I just want to quickly point out a couple of things with payment gateways, because I think this is always a struggle with A2X users and like, what do I do with my payment gateways? So so just when they asked about gateway, so we pretty much need to understand the context of that is because it's a payment provider or a payment method, not essentially an actual provider that was used to pay a specific sales transaction or sales order in Shopify. So commonly you can see PayPal, Sezzle, Klarna, all those other payment methods. But you can also see we have manual. There are a lot of customization that you can use in Shopify where the seller can say, oh, I want to name my payment method as bank deposit, right? And all those different payment gateways are accounted for outside of Shopify, meaning even though those are integrated in Shopify, in reality, A2X is not integrated directly to how those payment providers or how those money has been sent over to the seller's bank account. So the reason why we suggested a clearing workflow for those payment gateways is because we could not keep track every single transaction that happened to those finance providers, or we won't know where the check went to when the seller received the cash for manual payments, right? So all those factors, all we can see is that there is a certain sale transaction. Where do we see the payment? This is the chance for both sellers and accountants also to check and figure out who is accountable to collect that money. Is that money sitting in our bank account? Is that money trailing off? It's still an outstanding payment that we need to collect. So those are the means where a clearing account would be satisfied only if you cleared that specific account. If you have not cleared that account, then there is a transaction somewhere. We need to account for it. We need to figure out where to clear this balance or how to clear this balance. So I guess that's the idea of the entire clearing account workflow. Now, yeah, and as you know, as Swain said, it's another also way of like, maybe you have funds that you have not collected, which is such a perfect example. They did not realize that they accepted Amazon Pay in Shopify, and then they didn't add like, what's your payout bank account for Amazon Pay. So yeah, that's magically part of your cash flow in there that you were just neglecting. So yeah, so that's really one good thing about identifying every details as well with the clearing account, because you could see where is the source of your sales, but at the same time, where are those payments captured? How are those payments were captured against those sales transactions? And I guess one more thing will be the pending payments. If you encounter a pending payments, please don't be scared about it. They may be like, oh, wow, what is pending payments? So just a good rule of thumb. So there are two things in A2X we consider pending. So definitely when you have an order edit payout, it just mainly means that because as Amy mentioned, we have an adjusting entry, right? So we can't go back to the past. The order has been paid already. Now, let's say the customer wants to return something and then exchanged it for something else, or they want to add more into their cart, etc. So A2X could not go back to say the 1st of March to account for those order because we already captured that transaction. So what we do is we create an adjusting entry, but then because that's an adjusting entry, we will record it as part of the pending. And that pending is being reversed out to say if it was paid with a credit card or if it was paid with PayPal. So there should be that closing loop of the pending. Now, the other issue for the pending is if it is actually pending. And most likely, if your client is doing manual orders, please don't forget to tell them to mark their orders paid in Shopify. Otherwise, it's going to show us pending. So very common if you have invoices that you send with the net terms, right? And it might easily get missed. So accountants and bookkeepers need to be mindful and, ask their clients, have we received payment of this invoices? And if we have, then you need to mark those orders as paid in Shopify. Otherwise, we have a growing pending balance because A2X record the transaction, but then because it's an open invoice, we don't know when it will be paid, we'll put it into pending. So unless the seller or whoever manages Shopify close that loop, then A2X will not be able to close that loop again for the pending transactions. Yeah, just a few points.
Nice. Thanks, Gonzalo. Awesome. Okay, I think that's a really nice segue into the A2X directory. So if you're anything like me, you are going through all of these points thinking, wow, there's a lot to know, and I want to make sure that I'm doing this accurately and that I can have confidence in my numbers and visibility, then, and you're not currently working with an e-commerce accountant, then you can go to the A2X directory. So this is on the A2X website. You'll find Bean Ninjas in there, so you can reach out to the Bean Ninjas team. There's a bunch of other partners in there as well. If we actually have a, I think it's called Match Me or a Find Me Accountant option as well. So if you're looking for something sort of specific, region-based or channel-based, then you can fill that in, and A2X will put you in touch with an accountant as well. So yeah, these are all e-commerce specialized accountants that are familiar with A2X, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of value out of working with one of them. And then that pretty much wraps us up. So you can actually try A2X for free. You can jump in and create a free trial account via the A2X website. You'll be able to connect up in the way that I showed in the demo and then start having a play around. But yeah, definitely make sure you're getting those numbers checked and yeah, you'll be away. And then we're up to questions. So I can actually see there's been a few questions come through. So I'll read them out and then we can decide who's probably in the best position to answer them. But the first one is, currently, we download Shopify transactions into Excel and upload via CSV file to Xero. I then currently have to analyze each transaction we want to track the product sold and quantity in Xero. Is this possible? So we can definitely A2X could definitely automate that process for you. I wonder if the question's instead around updating the quantities in Xero, which A2X can't do anymore. Is that right?
No. So I think if you are using Xero, so A2X, we call it special features, advanced features, right? We can enable a few settings to help you set up. So if you wanting to keep, and this is only for Xero users, because Xero has this track Xero inventory feature that A2X can actually use when setting up your account. So if you wanted to track by quantity, meaning you have let's say you have 5 SKUs sitting in Xero, and each time you have your cost of goods sold recorded, you want that quantity reduced, then we can, enable a setting in A2X that will account for each SKU or number of quantities each time those SKUs are sold. That will then reduce over to your Xero quantities, and it will update your Xero quantities. Now, analyzing transactions. So yes, that's very common. Everyone started with Excel, but obviously A2X would be able to automate those things for you. And we'll keep it up. We'll set it up initially, and then everything will just be a breeze.
I'd like to add, it's important to remember what each of these systems was designed and really built to support. And when we look at Xero, our opinion is Xero is a dual entry accounting software that really helps provide financial reports. So it helps you organize all of your transactions into those beautiful profit and loss and balance sheets. When we're talking about understanding inventory quantities and how much stock we have on hand, Xero was not designed to be the best solution to provide that data. So we recommend, as brands scale, that you implement an inventory management solution. We talked about this a bit earlier. Some amazing ones to research would be Finale and Sin7. I think they now call it Sin7 Core, which would have been formerly known as Deer. But those two systems for early stage brands that are looking to scale are both affordable, but also help drive that keen understanding into the quantities across the various SKUs that they support. So Debbie asked, is it possible? Kind of, but it's not going to support your ability to scale.
I would say, and I may just add, yes, maybe 5 SKUs is okay. Or, very, very small amount of SKUs. But if you're talking of like hundreds of SKUs there, then I'd say, yes, definitely we need something much more robust to take care of the inventory piece.
I cannot stress that point more using the system, what it was designed for. We used to often get asked as well about splitting your sales out by individual SKUs, which you can do, but it makes your financial statements massive. And it was often that people wanted to be able to create dashboards or run reports or just see profitability by SKU. And kind of had to say, there's far better tools to be doing that than A2X and Xero. If you're wanting to see that, then get a dashboard or an analytics tool that's going to be able to do that for you far better. Cool. And then the next question we had was around PayPal. So Manuel, I know that PayPal is slightly different because it does have a direct integration into Xero. Did you want to explain that a little wee bit?
Yeah, sure. So PayPal, because it's a Xero integration, so you can look into having your PayPal channel through directly against the PayPal bank feed, right? So 2 things: if you're connecting PayPal to Xero through a bank feed, then you still need to. We can't really do an exact match, right? The reason for that is because if you have 50 transactions in a day, let's just say even 10 transactions in a day, where they have used PayPal as a payment method, what A2X will do is we'll create a summary of all those 10 orders that happened for the day. So let's say that 10 orders is $1,000 that was received from PayPal. However, in PayPal bank feed in Xero, it will show you the breakdown of those 10 orders. So you receive $100 each. So in which case, you can't really direct it to do a one-click reconciliation match because of the nature we summarize the orders. So in which case, you can create a rule in Xero that any PayPal receipts that you receive, you could make a rule to put it to the PayPal clearing account so that you're closing your clearing account. You're making the balance clear as you're receiving those receipts in Xero. Now, I believe Xero PayPal integration splits out the fees already. So you can also make a similar rule for fees to just put those fees to your either PayPal fees, merchant fees, or bank charges account.
And to add to that, I think one, it's important to use the cache coding feature when reconciling those transactions rather than hitting OK in PayPal, what might be a few thousand times based on your volume of orders. But I think, Amy, you mentioned earlier the critical task of at the end of each month, pulling down your PayPal summary statement for that month and just ensuring at a top line that your Xero balance is in sync with what's being represented in PayPal. We see a common mistake where sellers come to us with their PayPal balance in Xero out of sync and have no idea. Oftentimes it comes from them duplicating their sales transactions and also reconciling those transactions as sales from the individual transactions that post in Xero.
PayPal can be quite a complicated one, especially if people are using it to pay for things as well, rather than just money coming in. So yeah, there's a lot to consider there. So those are all the questions that we had. I will start the wrap up. So if anyone has any last questions, feel free to pop them in. But I just want to say thank you both so much, Wayne and Manuela. I've really loved how hands-on and practical this session has been. So I'm sure people will be able to get a lot of useful tips and things. So thank you both so much for your time.